This is The Amazing Beauty of Creation. I'm Bilal Katrada.
And I'm Talha Katrada.
And this is the show that brings you up close with the universe around you. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our very first episode of our podcast called The Amazing Beauty of Creation. Now, this episode is just going to introduce what our podcast is all about and why we are doing this. So, firstly, what is it about? The idea is that Talha and I are going to share our passion for science and technology, for the creation around you, whether it's astronomy or biology, physics, string theory, particle physics. There's so much going on in the world around us. We just need to take some time out to observe, admire, and appreciate. So this is something we do all the time. So what we are going to do is we're going to share with you our passion. Now, who is this podcast for? This podcast is for anyone. It's not a it's not just for science buffs, so it's not just for Muslims, it's not just for any one particular group of people. If you live on planet Earth, then this podcast is for you. The aim is not to to punt any specific point of view. It's just basically to marvel at creation, to look at what's out there, and to get this humbling feeling that there's so much that's going on in the universe around us, and we are so tiny, so insignificant compared to everything that's going out there. So although we do quote the Quran, we do quote the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but this is by no means an exclusive podcast for Muslims or even for science buffs. And I promise you, even if you're not a science buff, you'll understand the concepts here because we'll bring it down home. We'll simplify the concepts. Now, when you look at the Quran as a holy book, the Quran is extremely unusual in the sense that other than just being a holy book like every other holy book, it does include religious aspects. It does include some history, but also it's unique in a sense that it's always encouraging people to go and read, to go and learn, to go explore. Look at the universe around you. Look at the rising of the sun. Look at the movements of the celestial bodies. Look at this alternation of night and day and the blowing of the breeze and the floating of the ships on the water, and ponder about these things, because these things are signs of the greater being, the greater creator who made all of this. These things, by looking at them, they are going to humble you and they're going to point you in the right direction. I mean, think about it. The very first word of the Quran that was revealed was the word Iqra, which means read, learn, understand, comprehend, explore. So the Quran is unique in that sense that it encourages people to go and learn and to explore. And then the Prophet ﷺ himself, he was extremely fond of learning, extremely fond of knowledge. In fact, there's a famous saying of his, go to China if you have to seek knowledge. Now, what does that mean? I mean, there was no shortage of knowledge in Medina in his time. He was the source of all Islamic knowledge. Everything came to him via revelation. So why would he encourage why would he encourage his companions to go to China if they have to? Which tells you that there's so much more knowledge out there that we as human beings need to gain over and above religious knowledge. And we need to go to the ends of the earth. I mean, that was probably the furthest, China was probably the furthest place that the Muslims knew at that time. So in essence, what he was saying was, go to the ends of the earth to learn, to gain knowledge about the world around you. Now, on this basis of the encouragement of the Quran and the encouragement of the Prophet, you found that after the time of the Prophet, there was a lot of scientific progress in the Muslim world. It was what's known as the golden era of Islamic science and technology, and a lot of the foundational concepts for modern science, modern mathematics were laid down in those times, in that era. I mean, today we landed people on the moon. We've got cell phones. We've got amazing technologies that are coming out daily. But none of this would have been possible without the discoveries that were made by the great Muslim scientists in that era. So, I mean, there were people in that time that really took this very, very seriously, and they ran with it, and they made some amazing discoveries. But when it comes to a Muslim specifically, what does a Muslim look for in science? Why does a Muslim study science? Why does a Muslim get into fields like science and mathematics? Now, generally, the first and the foremost, this is not something that that just the science buffs among us need to get into. It's something that every single Muslim has the responsibility. I mean, if you read the Quran, then it's your responsibility to study science. And why? Why do you study science? First and foremost, to recognize your Creator. I mean, we cannot see our Creator. We don't have any descriptions of Him, but He tells you in the Quran, don't try and imagine who I am, but look at me and understand me through my creation, through the creation of God, which is science. Everything around you, whether you're staring at a rock, or you're staring at a celestial body, or you're staring at a little plant germinating out of the ground, you are admiring the Creator through His creation. The second reason that a Muslim studies science, and this is very, very important, I'll give you a quote later on, is to benefit the creation. To benefit the creation. How do we use our knowledge of science to enrich people's lives? How do we use it to make people's lives better, to alleviate poverty, to cure illnesses? So that's the next motivation. Now, a Muslim never ever studies science for destruction, for evil or destruction. Like, for example, the invention of the H-bomb, which Talha will tell you a bit more about. So the H-bomb was the most destructive thing that human beings have ever invented in the history of mankind. And Talha will tell us about it.
Okay, so the H-bombs, the development of them started in 1939 and was led by Dr. Robert Oppenheimer. Now, in 1939, this project cost $2 billion. And if you convert that with inflation to today's time, it will be $22 billion. Now, the H-bombs were the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. In Hiroshima, the bomb killed 20,000 soldiers and 126,000 civilians. In Nagasaki, there were 80,000 civilians that were killed. Now, the total death count of these two bombs combined is 226,000 people.
Is that right? I mean, are those numbers right? That's 250,000 people.
And only around 20,000 of them were soldiers.
Sure. That is destruction on such a large scale. So, in a matter of minutes, 250,000 lives were destroyed. I mean, 2 whole villages were destroyed by this one invention. I mean, what's scary is after that, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, he says he made a very famous statement. He says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," with so much of regret. And he spent the rest of his life lobbying against nuclear proliferation. It was a regret. It was a source of regret for him. Now, for a Muslim scientist, we never ever pursue discoveries like this. I mean, look at it, $22 billion. Imagine if that money was spent in something like how to alleviate poverty, or how to find more efficient ways of agriculture, or how to, cure certain diseases. I don't know, whatever. I mean, $22 billion is a lot of money just spent on destruction of 250,000 lives. That's sad. So anyways, moving on, as I was saying earlier on, there was that golden era of science and technology in the Muslim world. And at the heart of this were some really amazing people like Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, who was one of the greatest Muslim scientists, or one of the greatest scientists and mathematicians that ever lived. Did you know that his discoveries and his book, basically, his book was called Al-Kitab al-Mukhtasar fil Hisab wal-Jabr wal-Muqabala. That book laid the foundations for all modern mathematics. Try to think about it. And modern mathematics is the foundation of all scientific discoveries. I mean, you've got these highly intelligent professors that are and scientists that are sitting in labs and universities around the world that are making amazing discoveries. They're using calculations that were based on the learnings of Al-Khwarizmi. So this man laid the foundations for all of this. I mean, we couldn't have done anything in modern science and technology without him. Now, he made a very important statement, and you know what, Tal, I think we should do an entire episode on Al-Khwarizmi, because this man, I mean, he was amazing, right? His famous statement was that everything I do is an act of God. I do this for God, whether it's science, whether it's mathematics, whether it's writing a book. I do this as an act of worship. Now, this is the essence of what, the reason that Muslims get into any field of knowledge. So remember that it's always between the creator and the creation. So with our knowledge of science, we get closer to the creator, and we learn how to benefit the creation. All right, so that's a wrap for this episode, and please subscribe. You can also follow us on our social media channels to keep in touch with what's happening in our world and when our next episodes are coming out.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at AB of Creation to give us feedback on our podcast and let us know if there's anything specific you'd like us to discuss in a future episode.